Well, I was really selling the Bundy book, the first one. I've been on TV shows in New York and L.A., Washington, and I was coming home. I'd just gotten home. A friend of mine, a journalist in New Orleans, Richard Angelico, called and said, "What do you think about this Lucas guy?" I said, I don't know. What, Lucas who? He told me, he said, he says he's killed all kinds of people, and they've got him on trial up in North Texas. I thought you'd be there. And I said, well, I've been a little busy, but I'll look into it. And I got to calling around with police contacts I had and other newsmen, and it seemed as though he was saying even then he'd killed dozens to begin with. And then a couple, 3 days later, got up to 100, as I recall. But I called a couple of cops, and they said, well, look, I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but what he says, it seems to check out. I still couldn't believe it. When I found out he had a fourth grade education, and I just couldn't believe it. I just left Bundy, 3 or 4 years of Bundy, and here was an intelligent guy, and he'd done all these things. I couldn't imagine a fourth grader doing that many or many at all.
And never leaving any evidence.
Right.
Never being seen.
No forensic evidence was even mentioned yet. That came along later. People made up some evidence. But I thought, I called the sheriff, and he said, well, I can't talk to you, but he said, if I was you, they're going to take him to Denton, Texas. If I were you, I'd go see who I could talk to there.
Now, do you remember what sheriff this was?
I do not know. Okay. I knew nobody in Denton County.
All right.
Oh, the sheriff that I called up there, it was, gosh.
Oh, that's okay. I was just wondering if you knew.
Long Dog, what was his name? Something Dog. I talked to him once before, but anyway, I decided that I'd try, and I called around. I found out who had been named his attorney or to represent him, and he was coming there within the week. So I called the guy, never heard of him, and he said, hey, aren't you the guy that wrote that Bundy book? I just finished that. And I thought, wow, that's what luck is.
Calling card.
So I went up and met Tom Whitmore, and we spent 3 or 4 hours, and he wanted to talk about Bundy more than he did want to talk about his client. But I said, well, what about this? What about that? And he said, yeah, I can't get you in there. They won't let any press near there. 2 or 3 hours later, he said, let's go try. I'll try to get you in. And luckily, there was no activity at the Denton County Courthouse or jail. One guy was sitting there watching television, watching a movie, didn't want to be bothered. And he knew Tom, the lawyer, so he said, oh, come on, I'll take you, but wait a minute, this is a good part right here. I thought, boy, I'm in luck. This guy's interested in something else. So he takes us in, and it was the most bizarre interview, I guess. One of the most, not entirely the most. Here was this guy, dirty clothes. The aroma in that cell was just unbelievable. Obviously the toilet had backed up. Obviously he hadn't bathed in days. And it was horrendous. But I was there for a purpose. I had to sit on a cot. Tom, the lawyer, got the only chair, and we started talking. I kept asking him questions, and Tom tried to tell him what to expect when the trial happened 2 or 3 days later. It was pitiful, really. I looked over at the table, and there was a coffee jar cap or something with something water in it and a glass eye in it. I thought, geez, with that and the smell, and this crazy-looking guy with 2 or 3 teeth out grinning at me, it was the most bizarre moment in a long time. So
now, Were they keeping him like that on purpose? Because as
No,
I
I don't
recall,
think-
Henry, he was always clean.
Well, he was clean when they got the pressure and everybody was seeing him. Yeah.
Okay.
This is when he'd just been out in the field showing them where he had put Becky's body parts.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been digging, and part of the dirt was from being out in that field.
Well, what Henry tell you during this first conversation?
Well, he didn't tell me very much. I said he started crying when he was talking about Becky, and I said, "Look, she hit him. They were asleep on the ground because they didn't have money for a motel, and she hit him, and he just immediately got his knife and flung back and killed her." He kept elaborating on that. It was just an accident. And
Do you believe he killed Becky?
oh yes,
Okay.
of course I do.
I've always had my doubts
Oh
about that.
no, I've never had my doubts on that.
We'll get back together and you'll convince me.
Anyway, I said one time, and he kept saying, "I loved that girl so much. She loved me." And I said, "Well, if you loved her so much, why did you slice her up and bury her all over county?" And he said he just kept crying. Then the jailer, the only one there, came to talk to Tom, the lawyer, and they stepped outside. And at that time, he said to me, "Don't believe it, I'm making it up. Come see me, please come see me." And I didn't know if I could or not.
Now he said, "Don't believe
what I've been saying. I'm making it all up."
what I've been saying. I'm making it all up."
Yeah.
So he told you that in the first meeting.
First meeting. During the trial, I ran into Boutwell, and Boutwell mentioned the book, the Bundy book, too. He said, "Mark my words, Henry Lucas is going to be bigger than Bundy." I said, "I know what you did." He said, "You sure made some cops look good in that book." I said, "Well, I made friends with some of them." And I said, "By the way, the guy that helped us more than anybody else was a guy named John Boutwell. Is he any relation to you?" And Boutwell grinned and said, "Well, I don't reckon, but sounds like he might be." So as he's leaving after the conviction, two guys are escorting Lucas to his mobile unit. Boutwell says to me, he said, "No, he's going to be bigger than Bundy. Why don't you come talk to him? You can come anytime." And that opened up the way. It took me, well, it was a week or so before they set up task force. But within a month, I was down there starting to interview him.
So you would go from Dallas down
Yes,
to Georgetown.
yes. And I had free access to him for a long time.
Tell us what that was like.
Well, Henry was always looking around to see if anybody's listening, but he was talking. And he always said, "They're taking me here, and they did this, and they showed me pictures." And one day, I went in to see him, and he was in with one of the Rangers, maybe somebody else, I don't know who else. And he was sitting there with a book, looking through pictures that some cops had sent in.
Crime scene
crime
photos.
scene pictures,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I didn't say anything. We talked about it afterward, and he said, "Oh, they do that all the time." But
So Henry told you they showed him pictures, plus you saw him looking at
I saw him looking at pictures, and later I talked to cops that admitted that they gave him pictures.
Mm.
We wanted to show him, one of them told me we wanted to show him what the terrain was like, and,
And then he would repeat what he saw in the pictures. Huh?
right.
Yeah.
Right, and they would help him. The way Boutwell got the confession in the Orange Sox case, if you read that closely, my God, he says he killed somebody 100 miles south of Austin. And Boutwell said, "Well, are you sure of that? Well, could it have been up there north about 20, 30 miles or so?" Henry say, "Yeah, it could have been." "Did you do this?" "No." "Well, it looks like you did, and you told me you did. Well, I just forgot. Yeah, I did. You know, he would
Yeah, I've seen
he
some
would
of
just manufacture to fit their wants.
those. How was this making you feel as you were going through this? What were you thinking?
Well, I was a little bit scared because I thought when they find out what I'm doing, they're going to try to do something to me. Because at that time, I was the only reporter anywhere near getting the real story.
And were you taping these interviews?
I taped almost everyone.
Do you still have all those tapes?
No, I lost some in a burglary of my home.
So you're home here in Dallas? You're home here in Dallas?
Yes, I was living in East Dallas. I was going through a divorce, living alone. Came back from another assignment. I think I worked on the Little Rock case where the cop's kid was really the killer and they got him off.
Scotty Scott.
Scotty Scott.
Yes.
And I came home and one window was broken in and 30, 40, 50 tapes were gone. They left 2 Pentax cameras, which were pretty expensive. Did not touch them at all. And I don't know who did it, but I never told anybody because I called a friend of mine named Bill Alexander, who was an assistant DA.
I knew Bill.
And a couple of cops and talked to him about it, and they said, you know, you're involved with this. They knew what I was doing. And I said, I told them, you know, what I thought. And they said, well, if you report it, it'll get all over other police, and some cops don't like you now already. So I wouldn't say anything about it, and I didn't.
So you kept it to yourself, except for
Kept it to
telling Bill
myself.
Alexander.
Within a week, I was back to interview Lucas. And as I walked into the sheriff's office, he said, "Hugh, I'm sure sorry about your break-in and everything at your house." I had not told anybody. And I know the 3 guys that I talked to didn't tell him.
No, Bill wouldn't tell. I know that for a fact. Yeah.
No. But things went downhill starting about then. You remember Bob Lemons? He had a daughter killed. He stirred up the task force a good bit.
Yeah, he did. Let's just for a second. Let's go back to the tapes. I want to make sure I got this right.
Excuse me.
You had tape recorded all of these interviews,
Everyone.
and then when you were in Arkansas working on the Scotty Scott case, which was involved with Lucas, Lucas took that case, and they got a policeman's son free of a murder charge.
Right.
He had already been convicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Scotty Scott. And so then
And
you're
he's
up there.
free today.
He's free today still. Then you come home and your house has been burglarized. There's a window broken out. Expensive cameras left, not taken, but your Henry Lucas tapes were taken.
Yes.
Did they find all of them?
No.
Okay. Did you continue to see Henry after that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
Even though Boutwell by then probably knew what was on the tapes.
He probably knew what was on the tapes, but after I told the newspaper, where was the trial on House?
San Angelo? No? I can't remember.
Close. Anyway, I told the reporter that he was innocent, that these witnesses from Florida were telling the truth, and that I could prove it. Shouldn't have done it, but I was so mad at Boutwell. They called me in and told me, "You sound like you're not on our side." And I said, "Well, what makes you think that?" I just had an opinion, and the reporter asked me, and I told him. Well, that's when they started bringing in other book writers. They brought in a guy that was a reporter for the Austin paper, later became the flack or the PR guy for the Rangers.
Mike Cox. I used to call him the whore for the Texas
Yeah,
Rangers.
they brought him in. Bob
Not a journalist at all.
No. Bob Prince brought in a car dealer from Waco, and he spread a little
Johnny
money.
Dodd.
Yeah, Johnny Dodd. He spread a little money around. That didn't work out too well.
No, it didn't. Matter of fact, Prince ultimately during our grand jury got called on the carpet
Did he?
For that book deal that he got Lucas to sign with Johnny Dodd.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Prince was
They
going,
signed it at
I
the
got
state,
nothing to do with it. I had
Yeah.
nothing to do with it.
and they signed it at the state Rangers headquarters, didn't it?
Yeah, in Waco, the Ranger Hall of Fame
Yeah.
Museum and offices in Waco, yeah. And Johnny Dodd was an assistant constable and was friends
Yeah.
with Prince. Might have even been related to Prince in some way. I can't remember.
And you know the other one, what was the other one? The sheriff wrote the foreword to this horrible book about them going all over the countries, several countries, kidnapping kids and killing them.
The Hand of Death.
Right.
Yes.
He made $300 or $400 for writing a little
Yeah.
entree to that.
Boutwell did. Yes, he did. Yeah.
So I told him, I said, look, you can bring in all the people. He called me, Boutwell did, said, Henry doesn't want to see you anymore. And I said, well, I'm coming down. I need to talk to you and him. I did. I went down the next morning. And I told him, and Prince was there with him.
Did you have anybody with you?
No.
Oh, you're a brave man.
Well, I didn't think they could get me in broad daylight. Anyway, I said, look, you can bring in whoever you want and then let access to anyone you want, but if you then won't let me, you're in for a heap of trouble. And they said, well, we don't take threats very seriously. I'll tell you one of the funniest though, and you know all about this, is when I brought the Japanese crew there.
Tell us about that.
That was so hilarious. I got a call from a friend of mine who's Japanese, and he had friends that worked for a main TV outfit in Tokyo. And Henry Lucas was claiming he killed people all over the world. And so I said, well, I don't know whether the sheriff's good humor or not, but I'll make the entree. So I asked the sheriff one day when we were having a good time, this was before the burglary and all, I said, you know, this is going to be worldwide interest. I know these Japanese people, they'd probably like to come and talk to you about it. And Henry. He said, yeah, oh, that's good, yeah, tell them okay. So within a week, we brought a 4-man Japanese TV crew in. And I sat with him. I have pictures of all of us together. And they were talking to him, and I was sort of leading Henry along. I said, well, Henry, tell him about this, tell him about that. Knowing he could never tell the same story twice. Boutwell was sitting there and grinning, you know, and they were shooting pictures of him and everybody. One time he looked over at this one Japanese guy, lead reporter, and said, I got some in your country, you know. And that everybody sort of looked around, and they said, "Oh, it's on them. It's a Honda, yes." Boutwell knew he was in trouble then, so we'd been there a couple of hours, and in fairness, they had no more questions really. He said, "How'd you like to go out and see the scene where Henry killed the Orange Sox?" Well, naturally. They're going crazy. Yes. Oh, yeah. Can we really? Yeah. So we all went out there, and it was so funny. There was a caravan of 3 or 4 cars. The DA was there. Boutwell was there. Henry was there. Me and the Japanese were there, all along the road and looking down and saying, that's where Orange Sox was. Just amazing.
Was Ed Walsh the DA then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was hoping to run for something bigger.
He wanted to run for AG.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to take on Maddox. And he was, remember, very critical of our grand jury and of Jim Maddox for being involved in it.
Yeah. You know, I went down to see Jim Maddox early on, before I met Hugh.
Uh-huh.
Told him what was going on. He was under indictment at the time.
Yes, I recall.
So he didn't have a lot of time to do anything about it.
When I went to visit with Maddox after it first started, when I was with my involvement, which was way after yours, and we had come up, we didn't know about the work you were doing yet, and we'd come up with at least 11 or 12 that we knew he couldn't have done. And so I realized I'm in over my head with this, Texas Rangers, all that.
Yeah.
So I went and shared it with Jim Maddox. And Maddox told me then, he said, you're not the first one I've heard this from. He didn't say who, not till later.
Yeah.
But he did. He said, you're not the first one I've heard this from. I think we'll look into this with you. And that's when Maddox joined forces. Matter of fact, Jonathan and I are going to go. We're still trying to firm up the dates. But since Jim is dead now, Marta Maddox, his wife, remembers a lot of this. And we're going to go down and talk to Marta about what she remembers about Jim's involvement, because he was under a lot of pressure too. And not only was he under pressure, but they put pressure on Mark White, not to fund what we were doing. Because Maddox was going to approach Mark White about some state funding to look into all these cases. And before Maddox could even get back to Austin, Mark White called a press conference and said, there's going to be no money for this. None. No state money is going to be expended. And we went, oh, he's been gotten to.
What was the head of the Rangers' name?
Back then?
He had just come from the FBI.
Oh, you're talking Jim Adams.
Jim Adams.
Jim Adams, yeah. Yeah, his head of the Rangers and the state police.
I got a little worried at one point, and I thought, I got to go talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. In fact, Paula went with me. We were dating then. She went down with me. And I said, look, this investigation is not a legitimate. You're only seeing one side of it, and this guy's making it up. Oh, Hugh, I can't. And I had worked with this guy when he was with the FBI. He had helped me on a couple stories. And he said, Hugh, you just don't understand. And I said, look, I do understand. Somebody's not paying attention in your shop.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept telling me, he said, well, we've got this evidence in this case, evidence in that case. I said, no, you don't. Because it's already been disproven. Well, I haven't been informed of that. It was a wasted hour, really.
When I met with Jim Adams, we had already done some of our grand jury, had compiled tons of documents. We had your newspaper article, and I had two assistant AGs, Reed Lockhoof and Mike Hodge, go with me. Maddox had assigned them to my office to help with that grand jury. And we present all this to Adams. He's sitting behind his desk, looking all smug, poker face. And I pushed it across the desk to him and said, we want you to have this. And we want you to clean up your own backyard, and we will leave it alone. Just reopen these cases, take a fresh look at them. He looked at me, he shoved it back, he pointed his finger at me and said, we're not reopening a single Lucas case, but I am going to investigate you. Yeah. And that was the day they started full-time investigation. Yeah. That was the day they started investigating me. There is no document in any DPS file anywhere that they were investigating me prior to late April 1985, after this grand jury had already gone and you had already published your newspaper article. So that's when they came after me. I remember going out in the hall and Reed Lockhoof saying to me, and seeing Reed was in a unique situation because he was the lawyer for DPS. He was the lawyer that the AG's office assigned to represent Jim Adams.
Yeah.
And I was wanting to talk to him out in the hall, and he goes, shh. Meaning, don't say a word. We didn't say a word to each other until we were way out in the parking lot. He said, I didn't want you talking in there because that man can hear everything, meaning he had the place bugged. And he was just scared to death. He says, I've never seen him like that. I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, I would take it really seriously. And I did. You know what happened after that.
I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, you did some more articles on that. You wrote some articles on me. And the Times Herald did a couple of really good editorials through that I appreciated too. Boutwell said, you're not on my side. the thing is, with people like me and you, though, there's only one side, and that's what's the truth.
Right.
Yeah, what's the truth? And right now, 30 years later, there's still people that don't want to know what the truth is.
That is true.
Tell me about Clemmy and your involvement, how you met Clemmy, because I remember the first time I met Clemmy, and she found out we had been talking with you. She was angry about that. She didn't like that. She said, I don't like that Hugh Aynesworth. Now, she started liking you later, but at that time, she didn't care for you. Tell us about that.
I hadn't been with her more than 3 times in all of this. And the way that I went to Henry, told him I wanted to do a book, and he talked to her, and he said, well, now she needs money for her Christian ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Will you give her a percentage? And I said, yeah, give her 5%. I said, but you have to understand that I got no money up front. I have no publisher, and it'll be years, 2 years at least, before there's any money in sight. And he said, oh, okay. But later he came and he said, she really needs some money. Could you make it 10%? I said, sure, no problem. But I repeated, I said, the way it works, unless they give you a big advance, which we don't have, because nobody believes we've got a story, there's no money until the book comes out. Okay, so I agreed to 10%. He later came back, wanted 15%. And I said, Henry, I've told you there's no money. No, let's stop. Let's just stop this. And that's the extent of our agreement. And I never met with her about any percentage.
The impression I got from talking with Clemmy was that Boutwell had convinced her not to like you.
Oh, I feel that's certain. That's certain.
Yeah,
and he was the key to her access to Henry.
He told her that you and I were both against law enforcement.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, against law enforcement. Yeah. So I don't, and I've never been against law enforcement.
I haven't either. I've even spoken at the FBI Academy.
There you go. I just like good law enforcement.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Vic Fizell Show podcast. And visit us at www.vicfizell.com for more information. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Drive laid back and lower your speed, 1877 with Vic.